definitely feel like the junior in this space. My predecessor, Catherine Howe, was an expert. I've learned a few bits from her, but you know what Fiona has said, and that video just then really sums it up, I think, because I guess to reflect on what's been said already a little bit, we shouldn't rush this in terms of new opportunities with neighbourhood area committees. When it becomes clear, it might well be, well, it is the case in places near to me, that people are saying, well, it's too, what you're trying to do with neighbourhood governance is a bit too early because the guidance isn't out yet. You know, it's what are you going to do? And so we've set up this cross-party member working group, which actually met last night for the first time. So with our LGR submission for West Sussex, which we were participants in recently, we also put a recommendation in there to set up a neighbourhood governance working group. So simple idea of a cross-party member working group, which will start to explore what what options there are, whether it's towns and parish councils, and we've got a couple of areas where some members are mobilising to do petitions for town and parish councils, which is absolutely fine, but we didn't want there to be a lack of a forum for having discussions in a cross-party way as we go through the next year or two. And it was a really good meeting last night. All people from all different political persuasions, really just getting to grips with the basics of, you know, what's a community governance review, what town and parish councils are able to do, the powers, what we know so far about neighbourhood area committees, when we might know more. And it was really just about relationship building and getting into a more exploratory space together, so that we can start to be ready to understand what we want to do next. And I think what that group's going to do next is pick up the baton from the work we've been doing so far, called Thriving Together, which is, you know, the council, the district and borough councils in our case, engaging directly with communities, bringing people together. We did work over the summer, which was on top of the West Sussex led survey for LGR, and actually went into, you know, what does LGR mean for you, and what are your priorities, what should we be putting forward as priorities into this process. Really good process over the summer. And I think this new member working group is going to carry that on through and share its understanding as a group of members, what it's learning about neighbourhood governance, and create an interaction between that group of members and the community leaders that are brought together with the Thriving Together platform. And it was great to hear Fiona talking about Go Vocal and so on. So we've used that over the summer and it's worked really well. And I think what we're in is a sort of a learning and exploration phase. And that's where we ended up last night, saying, well, that's where we are. We don't have all the answers. And we know that there are probably people in this room who are lobbying for a CGR. You know, that might cost us some cash. And I think, as Claire said earlier, it might be quite difficult for us to do that alongside doing LGR at the same time. So let's just take a breath and see what we all are trying to achieve, and learn what models might be out there. But I hope that we'll be on a journey of coming back to what's been said by others today, which is the mechanism and the tools are one thing, but what really matters is the features, if you like, of a really effective neighbourhood level entity. And what Fiona's talked about at Froome, doesn't, in a great strong sense, it doesn't matter to me that it's a town council. What matters to me is hearing what Fiona's achieved and what features, what are the key ingredients to that success, and how can those key ingredients, those key features, be understood in themselves and created hopefully in our case with this group of members, and then with the community in the way that I described, to really understand the richness of those features and the necessity for having all those conditions for success in place, and then finding the right structure and model to plug that into, to grow it and evolve it. I think there's something about we've started when we've started. We've tried to start as soon as we can because it needs time. It needs time for relationships to be built. It needs time for those political differences to be set aside outside the room a little bit, for trust to be built, and for people to work in the sense of being representative of place as opposed to representative of party. And to take that more community leader role into those conversations with community, to really explore and learn together. And then as the mechanisms and the options come along, creation of new town councils, influencing the shape and the richness and the depth of the neighbourhood area committees that might come our way, we'll be ahead of the game. Hopefully we'll have a stronger sense of what really matters, and then to be able to influence, hopefully, our neighbours, our new buddies, the other districts and boroughs that we'll join up with in the unitary process, to say, well, this is what we've done and this is what we think are really effective, to Claire's point earlier about the legislation, that effective way of doing this. And if there's a town council or a parish council that's in place, maybe that's what we should support to become more frum. And that is the place where the energy is. That's the place where the existing structure is. So put the features into that, help it grow, help it develop. And maybe the neighbourhood area committee can just be the mandatory feature sitting on top of that, but where the action is the town council. So I think it's really building the relationships and the trust and understanding the necessary features for success, the ways of working and all of that, the community development, the scope of decision making all the way through to action and custodianship by communities of various things. That's what matters. We'll build that and then we'll plug it into the right structure. And I think that's where we're kind of at. And there's something about the importance of the journey of building that richness, which is the main thing. So not to get distracted, as others have said, about the the structures and the systems, because in the end we'll just pick the one that works or the one that's already there. I think that's kind of it.
Great. Thank you, Paul. That was very rich, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. I've got a couple of thoughts from what you said. One is just sort of from listening to that, it's making me think about CFGS. We've talked about docking in and the sort of the wiring of decision making and governance from a system perspective, and it can always get quite kind of institutionalized and where things flow from kind of a constitutional element. But what you talked about there made me think about, okay, how do you understanding the features and the conditions for success, how do you wire success into the system and build it in through those conditions as opposed to structures? So that's got my brain thinking. I think that's a really interesting thing, to actually focus on the factors of success and how you build those in through your constitutions, the way governance and decision making works in a place, at whatever spatial level, as opposed to the kind of the formal settings and those parameters. And then the other thing which is a question for you, and you talked about the journey being as important as whatever you come to. And you talked about your cross-party group. How are you taking others on that journey? How are you including others in that learning progress and exploration?
it's early days. I mean, in terms of the Thriving Together work that we did over the summer, we've got community leaders, community facilitators who've got sort of paid roles to be a part of the team, if you like, who are based in community, who will take those messages out and facilitate those sessions, and they'll increasingly include the learning from the core member working group and feed that through so that people can start to really learn in a little bit more detail what these different options are and how they plug in for them, what their response is to them. So I think that it's a sort of a growing circle of understanding and sharing and community conversations, I think, would what we would envisage. And I think, hopefully what we've already started to do is to raise questions in people's minds about, okay, it's not as simple as just a structure. It's not as simple as a CGR and making sure Shoreham's okay because we're going to get ourselves a town council or a parish council. It's not quite that. We don't have to quite rush at that. What we have to do is understand what this is all about, and to the point earlier about sort of deeper cultural change and the players and the different perspectives and so on. It's to take your time bit, take time to understand each other and take time to understand each other's perspectives and what's right for the place. And I hope that if we hold back and do that long enough, the answer will pop out at the end in a bit of an easier way.